When I got an email from Wizards of the Coast asking if I wanted to interview Kyle Brink, the executive producer of the D&D team, I was suspicious, I'm gonna be honest. Insight check. See, I am not interested in being a mouthpiece through which Wizards of the Coast can do brand rehab after the OGL situation. As much as people love to accuse me of being a shill for Wizards, my channel and my voice are my own. And whether I say something critical or something approving, it's because I believe it, not because someone told me to. But I think they knew I wasn't gonna do this unless I was in control because they agreed to my terms, and those terms were this. First, I could ask anything I wanted, and questions didn't have to be reviewed or approved in advance. Second, I could record the interview and use that footage however I chose, but they couldn't use the footage at all for anything. And third, they did not get to see or approve this video before it went up. So I agreed, and last Friday I sat down with Kyle Brink to ask him a bunch of very uncomfortable questions. It's about to start. I am nervous. Overall, he gave some answers I liked, some I didn't, and some that were clearly just PR, but we'll get to all that in a minute. First, I just want to explain why I'm even doing this. After nearly a month of chaos, constant news and updates and changes, I've noticed that a lot of people are feeling unsure about where to land on all this. Is the OGL situation truly resolved? Can we stop boycotting Wizards of the Coast? How can we ever trust them again? My goal with this video is not to tell you the answers to those questions. I'm not here to tell you what to think or feel. Instead, I want to provide the information you need to make your own decisions. And yes, share some of my personal thoughts. But first, let's start with a quick and dirty recap on the events of the last month, just to make sure we're all on the same page. In late December of last year, there were some rumblings of concern over whether or not One D&D would have an open gaming license, the license that, for the last 20 years, has allowed creators and third-party publishers to make content like adventures, subclasses, monsters, etc. for D&D. Wizards reassured fans that while they would be updating the terms of the OGL, it would only affect, quote, fewer than 20 creators worldwide. Then, in early January, a leaked new version of the OGL, referred to as the OGL 1.1, started making the rounds online. Over the following weeks, we all kind of freaked out. This leaked OGL required that anyone who uses it register their work with Wizards, anyone who makes over 50k gross report their income, and anyone who makes over 750k gross pay exorbitant royalties. This new OGL specified that it could only be used for static products, which means it can't be used for VTTs. Worst of all, it gives Wizards complete license to use any content produced under the OGL 1.1 in any way they want. During this time, Kobold Press and MCDM each announced new systems, and Paizo announced their own game license, known as the Open RPG Creative License, or ORC. Fans also started canceling their D&D Beyond subscriptions in order to send a message to Wizards of the Coast, who had been troublingly silent since the leak. According to Linda Kodega, reporting for Gizmodo, it was those subscription cancellations that drove Wizards to finally respond. They posted an updated version of the OGL and a survey where fans could voice their concerns, but when those survey results were overwhelmingly against any change to the OGL, Wizards apparently decided to cut their losses. They promised to leave the OGL 1.0 in place forever. And to prove it, they also placed the entire SRD, that's the system reference document, the game content that the OGL allows creators to use, into the Creative Commons. In case you're not familiar, this is a pretty big move. Creative Commons is an international nonprofit organization, completely out of Wizards of the Coast's control. Once something is released under the Creative Commons license, anyone can use it for anything forever. There's no going back. And that brings us to today. After all this back and forth, the community was left with a lot of questions. So I collected all those questions from here on YouTube, from Twitter, and from other creators, and I asked Kyle Brink about them. So let's hear what he had to say. In general, what would you say were Wizards of the Coast's goals with updating the OGL?
So this has been going on for some time. So I think we inherited some goals in this process. I've been at Wizards for 2 years, and it was in process when I got here a couple of years ago. We were worried about what hasn't happened yet. We were trying to future-proof D&D, looking at threats that were coming but have not yet emerged. Deep-pocketed outsiders entering the space and changing the face of D&D for their own corporate needs. We were concerned about what new technologies could offer. There's a lot of scams in the NFT space, for example. We were worried about that, about people bringing scams into the D&D space. When you have a larger audience, that means you'll have a larger impact from negative content, from content that would be hateful or hurtful. And so we wanted some ability to moderate that.
Has there been a history of hateful content made under the OGL so far, or is this something you were just concerned would happen in the future?
I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of stuff that's been made under the OGL and nobody can read it all. So I would be willing to venture that yes, but as I said, this is a future concern, not a current concern. We weren't trying to address something we had already seen. We just felt that since D&D keeps getting bigger and there's more and more people and it's a broader and broader audience, we felt like the risk was higher should hateful content be published, that more people would see it, that more people would be heard.
It sounds like you're concerned mostly about people being scammed through NFTs rather than just the existence of NFTs in general.
NFTs are a technology. They're a method of doing a thing. And so it's not so much the method that is concerning to me, but how it's been used. And most of the NFT space has been scams.
I was definitely startled to hear that this change has been in process for so long, especially considering how many problems the leaked OGL had. Like, what were they working on for so long if it wasn't making a good license? Unsurprisingly, he's sticking to the party line here. All of Wizards' official messaging cites these three concerns as the reason they wanted to change the OGL. Big corporations stepping on poor widow $5 billion Hasbro, NFTs and other unpredictable technologies, and hateful content. I kind of pushed him on these last two because, first of all, Hasbro does NFTs. They launched Power Ranger NFTs in October of 2021, so it's not like they're anti-NFT. Seems like they just wanted to be the ones making NFTs for D&D. And as for the hateful content, this part felt really contradictory to me because he basically admits that there's too much published under the OGL for anyone to review it all anyway. In which case, how would it be helpful to be able to remove it when you've already admitted that the volume is too high to police? My guess is that they put this in to make themselves look good, to kind of butter up their progressive audience and act like the OGL 1.1 was somehow a tool for good. It creates this bogeyman of hateful OGL content when, as a lot of folks have already pointed out, Wizards themselves seems to be the most guilty of making problematic D&D content, especially when you consider how much impact and reach they have in comparison to even the biggest third-party publishers. Is there a specific place or department or area that the push to change the OGL originated from that you know of? Online, there is a common assumption that it was a Hasbro decision that was sort of pushed down onto Wizards of the Coast.
I don't believe that to be the case. It had been in process for long enough that D&D was too small for Hasbro to have taken that active a hand in something like this. D&D is now bigger, and Hasbro is very interested in what D&D is doing. But a few years ago, when this OGL conversation started, to my understanding, D&D was a much smaller deal. And I would be very surprised if Hasbro had been invested enough and interested enough to say, hey, you've got this weird license around your content, even though you're a tiny part of our business. Were people from Hasbro involved in the conversation around the current incarnation of this effort? For sure. I mean, we were being responsible business people, including all the stakeholders.
Can you tell me what exactly does your role as executive producer of D&D entail?
So it's my job to make sure that the creators can create. I create the work environment. I make sure they've got the budget they need. I make sure we've got our roadmap worked out. Like, these things take years to produce. And so I am there to make sure that is possible. So I mostly try to stay out of their way and let them go. It is my job to make sure that the talent has what they need to succeed.
What part, if any, did you play in all of the proposed updates to the OGL?
I was one of the people at the table, and I was essentially the voice of the studio at the table. There were a lot of stakeholders in the OGL process at Wizards, and it was my job to represent the studio's point of view on things. The studio largely was very concerned about it, and I think one of my personal failings in this process was not bringing more people from the studio to the table with me to make our voices louder, and not being louder myself about what we saw as problematic. Any group of people has as many opinions as people, right? And so I'm not going to try to paint the whole studio with one brush, but if there was going to be a general tone, I would say that the studio didn't think this was going to be great for creators. I will say, or in some cases they felt it would be very strongly negative for creators. And at the same time, we also understood some of the concerns that we were trying to address with this.
While it doesn't sound like the decision to update the OGL originated with Hasbro, I would guess that it was Hasbro's people at the table who were pushing for the more restrictive parts of the updated license, especially after hearing that the D&D creative team had concerns about how the update would affect the community. But, he wasn't naming names, so all he really did here was say, it wasn't me, it wasn't my people. It's interesting that you
say that this has been in process for such a long time, because one of the things I wanted to ask about is if you have any insight into why there was such a communication disconnect between the Wizards of the Coast team and the D&D community. Particularly, I want to mention this sort of week of silence between the OGL 1.1 leak and the first official response, which I think for a lot of us felt like it stretched on forever.
You and me both, for sure. That was really painful time. It's one of those things where it's a large period of silence was built of minute by minute good decisions. We were in the process of already developing 1.2 when 1.1 was made public. And we felt that our best response, given the situation, was, hey, with this level of lack of trust, we need to take action. Words aren't going to cut it. Saying stuff isn't going to calm anybody down. They're going to just think we're lying. And fair enough, given what they saw in 1.1, why would they have trust in us? So what we needed to do is say, look, here's where we're actually going with 1.2. And 1.2 is a significant departure from 1.1. And we wanted it to be done to the point where when we put that draft out, people could go, okay, that's great. I like what you've done. And every day we had just one more thing to fix, one more thing to make better about it, one more thing. And then, now that day's gone. And now one more thing to fix and one more thing to add. And also the conversation was rolling online. I mean, there were new issues getting raised minute by minute by minute. And we're like, oh, wait, we got to address that issue in this one too. Oh, we got to address that issue. So like, even when we got just about finished, some new thing would come out. We're like, oh man, if we put this out without addressing that, that's not going to help anything. We got to address that. And so we just got trapped in that loop where perfect got in the way of done.
Right. I actually do kind of believe this part. I think they were scrambling, trying to figure out how to save face, ideally while still being able to change the OGL. And I think the more heated the conversation online got, the more concessions they felt like they had to make. Unfortunately, I have to ask about this draft thing, because I know Wizards of the Coast keeps using the word draft to refer to the leaked OGL 1.1 and says that you guys were soliciting community feedback, but we've also heard that these documents were sent to creators to be signed as a legally binding contract, so I'm sure you understand that from the outside, it kind of looks like Wizards is lying by calling it a draft. Can you explain that discrepancy there?
We were sending drafts of the document out for comment, and when I say draft, speaking as someone who works in books and written things, everything that's not published is a draft. Any draft could one day be the final. That's the point of a feedback and review process. And one of the things we were getting feedback on, for example, was timelines. And so there's going to be dates in those documents as well. That doesn't mean those were the fixed dates. Those were the dates that we were having people look at. And people could say, hey, that date is too soon. I couldn't possibly do this by then. That's good feedback to get, but if we don't put that date in, we don't get that feedback. 1.1, the whole intent of it was supposed to be basically a click-through license that people would agree to through an online process. The 1.1 was never supposed to be a thing you put pen to or DocuSign or something. There was always going to be this online intake method where you'd put in your product and sign up for it that way. So, as I mentioned, there were other documents involved in the conversations with these people that would have required signatures. And if it came as a package and you had to sign this just to even look at it, that could sound like you're supposed to be agreeing to it.
I honestly don't know how much more we can do with this line of questioning. Unless one of the people or publishers who was sent the OGL 1.1 in January shares the actual language from the emails, this just feels like a dead end. Some people are going to believe Wizards is lying no matter what. Some people are going to trust what Kyle just said. Frankly, I don't really see this as a very productive rabbit hole to dive down. Draft or not, it had been in the works for a long time, and it was a terrible license. In my opinion, it shouldn't have been sent out in that state for signing or for feedback. Do you mind telling me how the decision came about to put the SRD 5.1 into the Creative Commons?
A couple things. One is we, similar to my point earlier, when we're in a place where we are right now where trust is a problem because we've, given people reason not to trust us, saying irrevocable probably isn't good enough because people might not even take our word for that. And so we decided, hey, let's do something that is mechanically irrevocable, that nobody has to take our word for it. It's just, this is how it works. And the Creative Commons was that road. It makes it available for use. Arguably, we should have done Creative Commons as soon as Creative Commons was available years ago. The Creative Commons move was supported all the way up to the top as soon as it came to the table.
I don't have much to say about this except that I'm a big fan of the Creative Commons licensing. I think it's a fantastic solution, and it's what I will be publishing D&D content under in the future. I think this was genuinely a really good move, and I'm glad they did it, since obviously a lot of trust and loyalty has been lost throughout this process, and I'm curious about what other material plans you have to rebuild that.
we began working on a content policy as part of that conversation. And that's still good work to do. Even though in the current circumstance, we're not going to have any legal teeth to do that. We do need to police ourselves. And so, we need to clean up our own house first. So we're still developing a content policy, which we'll publish that people can see and comment on, so that people at least know how we're holding ourselves accountable. What are we doing for our own products as sort of a bar for what they might expect us to be concerned about in the open community. More conversations, of course, with folks. I want to make sure that people understand where we're going with things, and we're going to be addressing concerns as they get raised. What we want to do is we want to keep taking action, and it needs to be relevant action, so we're going to be doing a lot of listening as well.
I'm going to be real with you. I was surprised by how weak this answer was. I think, how are you planning to regain our trust was one of the most asked questions, and I thought they would have a really robust response prepared. Instead, he basically just said they're trying to police their own content better, they're talking with some YouTubers, and they're listening. I hear what he's saying about being responsive, and if they truly are going to be more receptive to community feedback, then that's great. But this is just one of those promises that doesn't really mean anything until we see it put into practice. I know Wizards has previously stated that there will be an updated SRD for 1D&D. Can you confirm whether or not Wizards is committed to providing an open gaming license for 1D&D?
The SRD will remain compatible with all the stuff we publish, including the new rule set.
Okay, so basically there won't be a new OGL. It'll just be updated. What we currently have will be updated to reflect the newer version.
That's right.
Okay.
And so there'll be an SRD, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, whatever, each of which will be in Creative Commons and under the OGL. So
a lot of people are asking about whether or not other things will be put into the Creative Commons, like previous editions of the SRD. Are there any plans for that?
We're looking at it. There may be settings or characters or something in those earlier SRDs that we would want to not put in the Creative Commons and would also not be necessary for playing 3 or 3.5. But barring that kind of a determination, yes. So we might, I could see us looking at them going, let's make this small modification to the 3.5 SRD before putting it in the Creative Commons. But we have to do that homework.
Right.
We're inclined to do so. We just want to do it responsibly.
This was, in my opinion, the most important question in this entire interview. Tons of us have been assuming that Wizards only backed down on the OGL 1.0 because they knew they could just try all the same stuff with the OGL for 1D&D. So I was actually pleasantly surprised to hear him commit to 1D&D also being covered not just by the OGL, but by the Creative Commons. Combine this with confirmation of their plans for older editions, and he's painting a picture of D&D mechanics being licensed under Creative Commons indefinitely, past, present, and future editions. I think that's basically the best case scenario.
So a lot of people enjoy playing D&D with analog systems like pencil and paper, printed books, stuff like that. Do you think those players have a place in D&D's future, or do you think that there's sort of a shift to digital that's happening?
We're adding play options, not taking away. However you want to play is great. If you want to buy books and play, if you want to buy dice and play, great, do that. If you want to play on D&D Beyond, great. If you want to play on a VTT, if you want to play in a virtual play space, awesome. If we want to look way ahead, if people stop buying something, then we'll stop making it. But it's not in our interest to make somebody stop buying something.
So I know there are a lot of concerns just in general, based on the world that we live in, about a shift to digital coming with a lot of microtransactions and things like that. Is that a valid concern to have over, for example, D&D Beyond or the official virtual tabletop?
If we're doing our jobs right, the microtransactions will just be smaller versions of cool stuff you want to buy. I could use a nickel to represent my character, or I could buy a figure, or I could buy paints to paint my figure. Absolutely, you'll be able to play, and it'll be a great play experience. And if you want it to be cooler, there will be options where you can have your experience be cooler. It'll never be required, though. It'll always be optional stuff.
Can you tell me about Wizards of the Coast's goals with regards to third-party VTTs?
We don't have goals regarding them. We like them. We've had a huge growth in D&D over the past couple of years during the pandemic, which would not have been possible without the VTTs. So we think it's great. The discussion around them in the OGL conversation, I think, created a perception that we viewed them as competitors or problems, and we don't.
I think most people sort of assume that you guys see VTTs as competitors because of the future of your own virtual tabletop being, in competition with them.
We'll be in the space and it'll be a competition, but the way I prefer to compete is not by making it harder for others to compete. I prefer to compete by being better and making better.
How much support do you think is planned for homebrew and third-party content?
I mean, homebrew is essential to the game, and we know that, so it's always going to be supported in any play method we give you. As we go into the virtual play space, and you've got a 3D space, obviously creating for that can get complicated. There's a reason why it takes a long time to make a video game in 3D, and so if I want to homebrew, my own city, I can just draw it on a piece of graph paper. But if I want to build it in 3D, unless I'm a 3D artist, I'm going to need some assets to build that out of. I'm going to need a space in which to build that. I'm going to need tools that are understandable to use to do that. So there's going to be some more work involved in supporting homebrew in something like the digital play space. So that may take some more work on our part, but we fundamentally believe that homebrew is central to the D&D play experience, and we're not abandoning it.
Despite the reassuring tone here, I think a lot of Kyle's responses about digital gaming do confirm some of the stuff people are worried about. Like, he basically said, we'll definitely have microtransactions, except you'll like them. And while he says they'll always support homebrew, he also confirms that the VTT will likely be difficult for fans to create for. I also think it's a little oversimplified to deliver this whole we make what fans buy message. Wizards is investing a ton of money into this move to digital, and their audience will naturally follow the trail of where they're investing time and money to create attractive features. To put it simply, the more they invest in digital, the more profitable it'll be. So while I believe him when he says that they're not in the business of forcing people to stop buying something, I don't think it's crazy to worry about whether or not analog players will have a place in the future of the D&D brand. He also claims that they have no beef with third-party VTTs, which, okay. Sure, Kyle. Those are the questions I had seen asked the most, and the answers that I felt were the most informative, whether in the way Kyle meant them or in terms of what wasn't said. But if you have more questions, I know of at least 4 other creators who were approached for interviews like this, and I will be linking them in the description as their videos go up, so you can see this conversation from all angles. So what do we do with all this? Kyle seems like a nice guy, and while I think it's clear that he was thoroughly prepped by a PR expert for these interviews, I do think he cares about D&D and believes a lot of what he's saying. That said, this isn't really about whether or not Kyle is a nice guy. It isn't about Kyle at all, it's about Wizards of the Coast. I've been seeing a lot of people talk about this as a question of whether Wizards is good or evil, whether or not we can trust them. But I think that's an unproductive and ultimately pointless question. Wizards of the Coast is not good, and they are not evil. They are a subsidiary of a publicly traded corporation. Morality is never going to be their primary driver. That will always be profit. We, however, can be motivated by morality. We can decide what behavior we will and will not reward with our purchasing power. If you want to be convinced that Wizards made these changes for the right reasons, I'm sorry, but I think you're chasing a rainbow. They made the right decision because we made it unprofitable for them to make the wrong one. This is a win not because Wizards came to the light side, it's a win because we took action, and those actions created results. So, should you trust Wizards of the Coast again? Personally, I don't think you should ever trust a corporation, but we boycott in order to have our demands met. So, if your demands were to keep the OGL 1.0 in place, then yeah, I think you should feel comfortable ending your boycott. But if you took this opportunity to explore new games, that's awesome, and I think we should all keep doing that. If Wizards wants us back, they can earn it by creating stuff that we want to pay for. And the next time they toe the line, be ready to close your wallet just like we did last month, because as you can see, it works. We do have power. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to go back to making silly videos in which I am mean to a version of myself wearing a different shirt. Is that okay?